All right, so this question says the colonies in this list were founded primarily to offer settlers a greater degree of. Now, keep in mind when we see the word founded, that does not mean that like it was found, like discovered. It means that it was created. So what we're trying to figure out is why were these colonies created? So Lord Baltimore organized the colony of Maryland in 1633. Thomas Hooker founded the colony of Connecticut in 1636, and Roger Williams established the colony of Rhode Island in 1644. So we've talked about all three of these people. All three of them have created colonies because all of them were seeking religious freedom. So B would be the correct answer here. All of them were creating these colonies specifically so that they could be places where people could live and not be persecuted, not be mistreated because of whatever religion that they wanted to practice. All right, this question says the factors listed above contributed most to the, so these things contributed, meaning they led to something, right? So distance from Great Britain, the Mayflower Compact, town hall meetings. So all these things are leading to C, growth of representative government in the British colonies. What we're essentially saying is that something like distance from Great Britain, meaning that the king couldn't just tell the colonists what to do all the time on every single issue, right? The Mayflower Compact was an early example of self-government. And then the fact that in these new colonies, the people had to actually get together and talk about issues and make decisions and things like that. All this led to them establishing and creating and growing these representative self-governments in the British colonies. All right, this question says the excerpt above reflects the dissatisfaction of American colonists with the. So if we're talking about dissatisfaction, we're talking about anger. We're talking about not being satisfied, the opposite of satisfied. So it says it is essential to the freedom and security of a free people that no taxes be imposed upon them but by their own consent or their representatives. So what they're basically complaining about here is taxation without representation. The fact that taxes were being put on the colonists, but the colonists didn't have a say in what those taxes were or how much the taxes were or anything like that, right? So what is it that American colonists were dissatisfied with? What was it they were angry about? Looking at these answer choices, the correct answer would be J, economic policies imposed by Great Britain following the French and Indian War. So the reason why this is the correct answer is because the reason why Great Britain was putting taxes on the colonists was because Great Britain had spent a lot of money protecting the colonies in the French and Indian War. And when we say economic policies, we mean any kind of decision having to do with money. So because Great Britain spent a lot of money, they felt that they could tax the colonists, but the colonists were upset because it was taxation without representation. All right, this question says the rights listed above were, so we're talking about unalienable rights, the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So this is something that's tested pretty frequently, this idea of unalienable rights. And where these come from is G, right? They were defined by Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence. These were things that he was saying that Great Britain was taking away from the colonists, and that it's the duty of the government to ensure that people, right, the citizens of that government or of that country, have these things. They have the right to life, to liberty, which means freedom, and the pursuit of happiness. You're not guaranteed happiness, but you're guaranteed, or you're supposed to be guaranteed, that you have the freedom to like seek out what makes you happy, essentially. All right, this question says, which argument would a Federalist make to support ratification of the Constitution? So if we're talking about a Federalist, we're talking about someone who supports ratification. So support means that they like it, that they want it. Ratification, right, to ratify means to approve. So what we're talking about is a person who likes the Constitution, wants to approve the Constitution, wants to make the Constitution the system of government that we have in our country. So the question is, which argument would they make to do that, to support ratification? What would they say about the Constitution and what it would do that makes it sound positive, right? If we're talking about someone who supports it, what are they saying that's good about it? So the correct answer would be G. A strong federal government will be more stable than a loose confederation of states. Basically saying that a federal government that's over the whole country, if it's strong, it's going to be it's going to be able to have more order and more, again, stability, and be able to make decisions much more easily than a loose confederation, meaning like a group of states who are all basically just wanting to do their own thing, right? We want a strong federal central government to make decisions for the whole country. And so that is why G is the correct answer. All right, this question says a certain small town has many choices for people who want to attend religious services, including two churches, a synagogue, a cathedral, a mosque, and a temple. These choices are protected by the. So, if we're talking about religious services, and we're talking about the fact that there are many different types of religious services, in this country, right? Why is it that we can have a lot of different religions in this country? The answer is F, the First Amendment. Remember, the First Amendment guarantees a lot of different freedoms. One of those freedoms is the freedom of religion. All right, this question says when citizens report for jury duty, they are helping uphold a constitutional right guaranteed by the. So we just have to remember what amendment in the Bill of Rights talks about the right to trial by jury. The correct answer would be C. It says that you have the right to have your trial judged not by the government, but by just normal people who would all serve on a jury, right? The jury is just made up of people who are randomly called upon, and so if you're reporting for jury duty, you are helping uphold the Sixth Amendment. All right, this question says which pair contributed to the development of political parties in the United States? So we can see the first pair is the Continental Army and the English Army. The second pair is George Washington and Paul Revere. The third pair is the Virginia Plan and the New Jersey Plan. And the fourth pair is Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton. So which pair contributed to the development of political parties? Basically asking which of these pairs created essentially the first political parties. That would be D, Alexander Jefferson, excuse me, Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton, because both of these people were people that basically hated each other, right? They disagreed on many different issues, and they both worked under Washington as president, whenever Washington was president, rather. But as soon as Washington stopped being president, these two immediately formed their own separate political parties, ran against each other essentially, and that is something that we've had ever since, right? All right, this question says, which constitutional principle is Jefferson referring to in this excerpt? So it says the question whether the judges are invested with the exclusive authority to decide on the constitutionality of a law has been heretofore a subject of consideration with me in the exercise of official duties. Certainly, there is not a word in the Constitution which has given that power to them more than to the executive or legislative branches. So there's probably a lot in here that we're not really familiar with, but there's also stuff in here that we are familiar with, like the word judges, constitutionality of a law, right? It's talking about whether or not someone has that power, right, to decide if a law is constitutional or not constitutional, right? So that is something that the judicial branch has. It's the power of judicial review. So D would be the correct answer here, because judicial review essentially means that the courts can look at a law, decide if that law is essentially following the rules of our government or not. And if it's not following the rules, if it's unconstitutional, it is no longer allowed to exist. So it'd be struck down. And that is the power of judicial review. All right, this question says, which of the following best completes the diagram above? And really, we're talking about this diagram here. So it says British support of American Indians in the Northwest Territory, British impressment of American sailors all led to what? And then that led to the Treaty of Ghent. So the correct answer here would be B, the War of 1812. Right? Both of these are causes of the War of 1812. They're things that Great Britain was doing that was angering Americans. And so eventually we go into a war with the British for a second time, right? This is the War of 1812. And then ultimately the war ends with the signing of the Treaty of Ghent. So that would be why B is the correct answer here.